Good morning and happy Sabbath to you. So thankful you guys can join us today. I pray that the blessing God has placed on this day will be in your life, in your day, in your walk with Him today. I wanted to share with you when I was probably in my early teenage years to my college years or so. One of the things I enjoyed doing so much was drawing. I had a number 2 pencil, and I had a bunch of colored pencils, and I had a bunch of paper, and I would draw a bunch of pictures. Some of them are a little strange. I wouldn't show them to you. This is probably my most rated G picture that I made back in my teenage years. And so I would work on them, work on the picture, put it all together, color it in, and I would use the eraser quite often, but once I was done, I would step back and say, this is what I wanted. This is what I liked. I don't need to make any changes to this. I don't need to make any more modifications to this. I would step back and say, And I kind of see God doing that, doing something like that on that first 7th day. He looked at everything and he said it was very good. He stepped back on that 7th day and said, I like this. I like the way things are working together. I like the way these codependencies are taking place. I love the creatures that I've made. I love the way they're interacting with one another. And I love the man and the woman that I created in my image. God stepped back on that day and said, I want to be connected with my creation. That first Sabbath day was a day of communion between God and man. That first Sabbath day was a day of joy, a day of learning, a day of fellowship, a wonderful experience, the first full day for the first man and the first woman. In our religion today, we have Sabbath keeping going on, but we can have it at one or two extremes. Some look at the Sabbath day as they would any vacation day, a time to put work aside, yes, but to just chill, relax, recreation as I would any other vacation day. And there are others who are more extreme in the other side, and that is they are focused on the do's and don'ts of this day. On this day, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do that. And everything that they're about to do, everything they're about to talk about, they have a shelf in the back of their mind that they check and look at and say, is this right? Is this wrong? What should I do? What decision should I make? Jesus in the Gospels shows us the true purpose of God's Sabbath. Jesus shows us what true religion looks like. In a nutshell, Jesus shows us not rules, but a relationship. Let's turn our Bibles to the Gospel of John. Gospel of John, chapter 5. We started this chapter a couple of weeks ago, began looking at this account. This is Jesus' closing of his Judean ministry. He is in Jerusalem. He just healed a sick man who had been sick for 38 years at Bethesda. To understand this account, I want to get a little background behind the Jews that he's going to have a confrontation with. It appears that these Jews were of the sect of the Pharisees. The Pharisees were the most influential religious group at that time in Jesus' generation. Now, how did the Pharisees came about? After the Jews came back from exile to Babylon, a group of well-intentioned religious leaders came together and they said, we want to be sure that what happened to our nation and what happened to our people that caused or that led or that triggered our God to send Babylon after us will not happen again. And so they began to seek to make the law of Moses, the law of God, something that everybody would understand, something that everyone would be able to know and to follow. They were concerned that what took place pre-Babylon will not happen again post-Babylon. They shared Nehemiah's concerns when he rebuked those who were bringing in merchandise to Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. He said, "Did not our fathers do thus? And did not our God bring all this disaster on us and on the city? Yet you bring added wrath on Israel by profaning the Sabbath." So the Pharisees said, let's get together, let's go through the law of God, and let's make sure everybody understands these things. The law of God says honor your father and mother, but what does it mean to honor? And so let's lay down some examples, let's lay down some rules that clarify what it means to honor, what it means to dishonor. Let's look at the commandment, you shall not murder. What does it mean to murder? Under what circumstances is it murder, and under what circumstances is it not murder? So they wrote down meticulous regulations to explain what murder is and what murder is not. And then you have the Sabbath commandment. You shall not do any work on the Sabbath. What is work? Let's lay that down. How far can a person walk on the Sabbath before it's work? How heavy a container or how heavy a load can they carry on the Sabbath day before that is work? And so they went through a whole bunch of regulations so that everybody can know of certainty what it means to keep the Sabbath and what it means to break the Sabbath. Jesus came to the sick man in Bethesda, and he gave him 3 unctions. He gave him 3 commands. He said, rise, take up your bed, and walk. And it's this middle one, this take up your bed, that we will see is going to be a real issue for these Pharisees. Let's continue. Let's look in our Bibles. John chapter 5, we're going to look there, verses 9 through 12. John chapter 5, verses 9 through 12. Jesus gave him that 3-pronged commandment, rise, take up your bed and walk. And immediately, verse 9, the man was made well, took up his bed and walked. And that day was the Sabbath. The Jews, therefore, more than likely the Pharisees, the Jews therefore said to him who was cured, it is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your bed. He answered them, he who made me well said to me, take up your bed and walk. Then they asked him, who is the man who said to you, take up your bed and walk? The Pharisees reacted in a disgruntled way when they saw this man carrying his bed from Bethesda. He identified Jesus in 2 ways. The man who healed me, the one who said, rise, take up your bed and walk. In their response, they referred to only one of those identifications. Who is the man that said to you, take up your bed and walk? They were not rejoicing with him in his healing. They were not sharing any gratitude or any joy in that this man who had been sick for 38 years is now suddenly made better. No, their concern was that he was breaking the Sabbath from their perspective, from their view. Someone might say, well, didn't they have a genuine argument on this? Don't we read in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 17, verse 21, thus says the Lord, take heed to yourselves and what? Bear no burden on the Sabbath day, nor bring it in by the gates of Jerusalem. Didn't God say plainly, don't bear a burden? Well, if the bed this man walked around with was a box spring and mattress, by all means, this is something that you can say ought not to be done on the Sabbath. But the bed that he picked up was basically what we would consider a blanket or a sleeping bag. It was a very light object, something that was no work whatsoever to carry around. But Jesus could have healed this man without telling him, take up your bed. Jesus could have healed this man and gave him the unction to rise and walk, but for a particular reason, he told him as well to take up his bed. Jesus was confronting the Pharisees on this point. There was a day when Sherry and I were driving my youngest boy and one of the other youth from the church from one spot to another. And we said, hey, let's keep these two young people busy, Jonathan and Jessica. Let's give them a little showdown. So we told them, okay, let's see which of you can text the fastest and which of you has the most friends. So for the next 5 minutes, text a whole bunch of people and let's see how many messages you get back. And the one that gets gets messages back from most people will be the winner. So Jonathan and Jessica are jamming out on their phones, texting this person, texting that person. For 5 minutes, they have this showdown. If I remember the numbers correctly, Jessica had 22 people respond to her. Jonathan had 20. Jesus here is having a showdown with the Pharisees. Not to show how many more friends that he has, not to show how quickly he can text, but Jesus had a showdown here. Jesus confronted the Pharisees for a very important reason. Jesus knew that a twisted view of the Sabbath equated to a twisted view of God. That is, when we have a perverted view of the Sabbath, we're going to have a perverted view of God. And Jesus wanted to make clear that it's not rules, but a relationship. In the gospel accounts, we find many accounts of Jesus keeping the Sabbath. What the things Jesus did on the Sabbath day. And this is important for several reasons. First of all, I want to point out that for myself, when I began reading the Bible, I read it from cover to cover, and I began interacting with many different people of faith. Most of them were Christians, but I interacted with several Jews, interacted with one man from a Baha'i faith, to get an idea of their views, to get an idea of their ideas. One of them was a Seventh-day Adventist. And so as I was reading the Bible through, I'm hearing different ideas when it comes to the Sabbath. The Jew that was my co-worker, he was not a practicing Jew. He didn't see any big issue with the Sabbath whatsoever, but you talk to other Christians, you get a whole bunch of different views. But one of the things that convicted me that the Seventh-day Adventists were spot on when it came to the Sabbath was what the New Testament, especially the Gospels, had to say about the Sabbath. When you study the Gospels, you will see that there are many different times, many different occurrences in the Gospels where we find Jesus ministering in one way or another on the Sabbath day. And it dawned on me, I started wondering, why did the Gospel writers include so many of these accounts in their writings? Their audience, the audience that they wrote for, these were Christians. These were the church. Why are they including these accounts in their writings? There had to be a purpose for that. And the purpose, as far as I can tell, the conclusion that I came to was that the church was still keeping the Sabbath, and that the writers of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were telling them, Jesus is our example, and this is the way he observed the Sabbath day. This is the way we ought to observe the Sabbath day as well. Clearly then, what we find is the gospel writers showing us that the Sabbath is still something that which God calls us to observe. Furthermore, the seventh day in the Gospels is still referred to by the word Sabbath. The word Sabbath comes from the Greek word sabbaton. And these Gospels were written a good between 20 and 60 years after the resurrection of Christ. And yet here in their writings, they are still referring to the seventh day as sabbaton. And furthermore, when we look at the original Greek, they are referring to every day of the week in reference to sabbaton. For example, the Gospel of Mark, chapter 16, verse 2, from the New King James Version, very early in the morning, on the first day of the week, that is the first day of sabbaton, they came to the tomb when the sun had risen. Young's literal translation can be difficult to read because the translation is so literal, but notice how it translates Mark 16, verse 2. And early in the morning of the first of the Sabbaths, they came unto the sepulchre. So please note that the gospel writers used that word sabbaton to refer to the seventh day and to reference it whenever they're referring to another day of the week. Clearly then, the gospel writers still considered the seventh day the Sabbath. But here's another aspect. Here is another proof I want to look at. In the Gospel of John, and I shared this with you before, the Gospel of John was written to second and third generation Christians, men and women who had never seen Jesus and who were going by his word and the word of others. Several times in the Gospel of John, he refers to holy days of the Jews. The Passover of the Jews was at hand. There was a feast of the Jews. The Passover, a feast of the Jews, was near. The Jews' feast of the tabernacles was at hand, and the Passover of the Jews was near, the Jews' preparation day. All these he's referring to as that which belonged to the Jews. His audience that he was writing to was writing to them a good 20 or so years after the destruction of Jerusalem. They were not familiar with Jewish customs, with Jewish language, and with Jewish rituals. And so each of these days, Passover, Feast of Tabernacles, etc., he's referring to as Jewish. But never once in the Gospel of John does he refer to the Sabbath as Jewish. No, when he referred to the Sabbath, it was evident, it was clear that his audience knew what he was talking about. The Gospels show us the perpetuity of the Sabbath, that it is a day that God is calling believers in Christ to observe, but the Gospels also show us the purpose of the Sabbath. Not rules, but a relationship. Let's take a moment to consider what a Sabbath of rules is like. What a religion of rules is like. When we have a Sabbath of rules, we tend to resent the Sabbath because we resent rules. It is against our nature. When we are told what to do and what not to do, there is in us a rebellion to that. I remember a young man who grew up in the church that I was baptized in. And quite a few years later, after I'd moved out here to Illinois, one time he sent a Facebook message to me and to many others who were in that church that he grew up in. And he shared with us why he is no longer a Seventh-day Adventist. It was a sad message. But one of the things that he pointed out to was that his parents were very strict when it came to the Sabbath. It became a day that he loathed. It became a day that he was not looking forward to. It became a day that he dreaded because of all the restrictions that his parents placed on him and on his brothers in that day. When we have a Sabbath of rules, the Sabbath loses its delight. When we have a Sabbath of rules, we it is our nature to find loopholes in these rules so that we can still keep the Sabbath but get around some of these things and do these things that we want. The story goes of a man who was heavy into purchasing and selling real estate. He was going to pick up his buddy from church, a fellow Adventist, at his buddy's mother's house. His mother had recently passed away. So he went to pick him up, and he saw in front of the house a for sale sign. And as they're driving away, he said to his buddy, you know, if it wasn't the Sabbath day, I would ask you how much you're selling that house for. And his buddy said, well, if it wasn't the Sabbath, I would tell you I'm selling it for $115,000. You see, we tend to try to find loopholes when it comes to rules. And when we have a Sabbath of rules, when we have a religion of rules, we may easily become one of those who micromanage the faith and the observance of others. I know a man who, after church, came up to me and showed me different quotes from the Spirit of Prophecy about what people against what people were doing, or from what he supposed was against some of the things that people were doing on the Sabbath. After having a sweet fellowship lunch, you had some people cleaning up, some people washing dishes and the like, and he was pointing out that this is a violation of the Sabbath day. This man had a Sabbath of rules, and when we have a Sabbath of rules, we can very easily slip into the mindset where we are micromanaging other people's religion. But when the Sabbath is based on a relationship, oh my, how different it is. Oh my, what a delight it can be. God said, remember the Sabbath day to keep it what? To keep it holy. That word holy, that which is holy, belongs entirely to God, exclusively to God. God says the tithe is holy. So a tenth of our income belongs entirely to Him, and so too the seventh day belongs to Him. It is a day to be dedicated to Him. It is a day to be committed to Him. It is a day to be spent with Him. Oh, my friends, if we love God, we're going to want to spend time with Him. If we love God, we're going to want to commune with Him. If we love God, our greatest delight will be found in being with Him, hearing from Him, sharing with Him, singing to Him, praising Him, walking with Him. And the Sabbath day was made for us that we may do those very things. I look at the Sabbath day in a sense as a date day with God. Tuesday nights, Sherry and I make our date night. She comes home from work, I put my stuff away, and we spend that time together. And we want to have that time to be exclusive with one another. Now, at times emergency pops up, at times this needs to be done, at times that needs to be done. Okay, but by and large, Tuesday nights is our date night. And so on that night, we try to be sure that the things that need to be done ahead of time are going to be done. If I've been in my PJs, for example, all day, and we're going to be going out, I want to be sure that I'm changed and dressed appropriately to go out with one another. If I wait till she gets home and then get dressed, I'm taken away from our time together. Am I making sense? The Sabbath day, in the same way, we want to not cumber that day with things that can be done ahead of time. Not for the basis, not for the purpose of following rules and regulations, but so that we may keep the Sabbath day clean of things that hinder spending time with God. On our date night, if we go to a restaurant, as we did in the pre-COVID days, If we go to a restaurant and that restaurant has a television screen popped up, I try to be sure to take that seat with my back to the television. Why is that? Because I have eyes that are drawn to a baseball game or drawn to a hockey game or drawn to a football game. And so if that television is in my view, if I'm able to see it and I'm trying to talk with her, I'm going to be constantly going back and forth between her and that baseball game. Oh, what a hit that was. Oh man, that was a strike. What do you mean ump? And so I'm going to be distracted when I should be focused with her. In the same way, if we want to spend that day with God, we want to be doing only those things which will enable us, allow us to stay focused on Him. When we spend that day together, we want to be sure that we're doing activities that we can do together. Sometimes we watch a lecture together that we both like and we both talk about later. In the same way, we want to carry on activities, recreation, which we can walk with Jesus through. Again, not for the purpose of keeping rules, but for the purpose of a relationship. I love this promise that we find in Isaiah 58, a promise to us that says, if you turn away your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy day of the Lord, honorable, and shall honor Him, not doing your own ways, nor finding your own pleasure, nor speaking your own words, then you shall delight yourself in the Lord, and I will cause you to ride on the high hills of the earth, and feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father. The mouth of the Lord has spoken. Please note, the promise given to us here is that if we want a relationship with God that grows in intimacy, that grows in fellowship, that grows in meaning, that grows in joy, He said, spend the Sabbath day with me. Give that day to me. Let's spend some quality time together. If you have a relationship with God right now that is not very fulfilling, or that you find is dry or empty, or you want it to become more moist, more meaningful, more fulfilling, spend the Sabbath with Him. Dedicate that day to prayer. Dedicate that day to fellowship with His saints. Dedicate that day to praise and thanksgiving. Dedicate that day to walking with Him, studying His Word, meditating on Him, spending time doing His will, doing the works that Jesus did, spending that day as Jesus did. Not rules, but a relationship. I want to take a look at Jesus' relationship with the Father and how the two of them spent the Sabbath day. Jesus said, I and the Father are one. Let's contemplate for a moment the relationship that these two had. Yes, they kept their individuality. They were two different individuals, and yet they were one. You will never find another relationship like this within all of humanity. Even among the most closely married couples, Jesus, the Father and the Son, were of one mind. They had one objective. They had the same desires. They had the same mission. They had the same purpose. They wanted the same things. And they worked together in perfect harmony with one another. The relationship between the two of them was inseparable. I and the Father are one, Jesus said. And what does He say about the Father and the Sabbath? Let's turn in our Bibles to the Gospel of John, chapter 5, our scripture reading. John chapter 5, and let's read there verses 16 and 17. For this reason, the Jews persecuted Jesus and sought to kill him because he had done these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, My Father has been working until now, and I have been working. In other words, Jesus is telling the Pharisees, and Jesus is telling us, that the Sabbath day, on the Sabbath day, you will still be finding the Father giving rain. You will still be finding the Father giving sunshine. You'll still be finding the Father giving us breath, ministering to us, continuing to give us life. You will still find the Father's Holy Spirit still inspiring us, still impressing us, still convicting us. You will find the Father still sending messengers to us, seeking to speak to us and appeal to us. On the Sabbath day, the Father is still working to give us life, to give us health, to give us hope, to give us strength, to give us happiness. My Father worketh hitherto. I have the King James Version memorized, obviously. The Sabbath day was not a day the Father took off, sat back, chilled, and twiddled his thumbs. No, the Father was still active in giving life to us. Jesus did the same things on the Sabbath day. The Sabbath day was probably Jesus' busiest day. When you study the accounts of how Jesus kept the Sabbath throughout the Gospels, you will get the impression, you will probably get the impression, as I have, that was one of Jesus' busiest days. Jesus went to the synagogue every Sabbath day. Jesus taught on the Sabbath day. Jesus preached on the Sabbath day. Jesus visited on the Sabbath day, even visiting at times those who sought to kill him and hated him. Jesus healed on the Sabbath day. Jesus sought to encourage people on the Sabbath day. Jesus ministered to others on the Sabbath day. My Father worketh hitherto, and I work. I and the Father are one. Jesus was doing on the Sabbath day what he saw the Father doing on the Sabbath day. Jesus was one with the Father. The Father worked on the Sabbath for the good, for the edification and the welfare of others. Jesus worked on the Sabbath day in the same way. My friend, what about you? And what about me on the Sabbath day? What are we doing on that day? What are we like on that day? God made the Sabbath for you. God blessed the Sabbath for you. For your refreshment, yes. For your invigoration, yes. For your recuperation, yes, but even more than that. God blessed the Sabbath day so that you can be a blessing to others. It is a day the Father wants to spend with you. It is the day the Father wants you to reach out to others as well. Not rules, but a relationship. The longest living married couple in America are Ralph and Dorothy Kohler. In 2020, they celebrated their 85th wedding anniversary. Ralph is 102 and Dorothy is 101 years old. When asked, Ralph said the keys to their long life and to their long marriage is healthy living and an agreeable nature. I want to share for a moment what I see in the Ten Commandments. In those first 4 commandments, we find some keys as well. Keys to a successful, keys to a fulfilling, keys to a meaningful relationship with our God. He tells us in the commandments that you shall have no other gods before me. One of the keys to a meaningful relationship with God is to make Him the priority, to make him first in your life. Then he tells us in the second commandment, he tells us here that we are not to make a graven image or bow down to it. And in other words, we are not to try to make God someone we want him to be, to make God someone we would prefer him to be, but to take him for who he is and acknowledge that and accept that and allow him to make us in his image. The third commandment tells us, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. When we respect God, when we give him the reverence that is due to him, our relationship with him will flourish. Our relationship with him will grow. When we accept God for who he is and study to understand God for who he is, we will fall more deeply in love with him. But when we make him what we want him to be, or when we treat him in a flippant way, then our love for him will not grow. Our relationship with him will not in any way flourish. Finally, the fourth commandment, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. God says, spend quality time with me. Take that day and let's come together. Let's have a date with one another. This is the last key I want to focus on. This is one of the most important keys, is quality time. If a relationship with God is going to grow, if a relationship with God is going to flourish, then let's spend quality time with him. My hope and my prayer is that the Sabbath day will become for you the delight of the week, that that day will be a day exclusively given to him, a day where you're not focused on do's and don'ts, but a day in which you're focused on a relationship. Not rules, but a relationship.